Hello, hello, sweet souls, and welcome back to another episode of It's All Happening. Today, I've invited onto the show another friend in God. I mean, who else do I invite onto the show except for the friends that I get to meet along this path and along this journey? But this woman came into my life very synchronistically, and we just immediately clicked. It was like, oh, you're waking up to God, I'm waking up to God. And then all of our conversations have been about navigating that and what does that mean and what does it mean inside of our healing and how does our healing relate to the awakening and the reconnection and how it's moving through both of our lives. So I am so excited to invite onto the show my friend, a sister in God, a confidant in healing, Audrey Kazmar. um yeah, introduce yourself, girl.
Yes, thank you, Molly, for giving me this opportunity to be on your show and to just have an amazing conversation. So, yeah, my name is Audrey, and a little bit about my story. I guess I'll just start from the beginning. I grew up in a very loving household. I was modeled that to survive, you have to hustle and work really hard, but very loving nonetheless. I moved back and forth to Arizona and California quite a few times. And somewhere along the way, I picked up the belief that I don't belong from moving from school to school and not really finding my place in the world, having really different interests. I was a really big animal girl. I had like a hamster themed birthday party.
Wait, I
I
love
didn't,
that. You were a
I
horse
didn't,
girl, you were a hamster girl.
I was a hamster girl. Like everyone brought their hamsters and their balls and they had a race. So I was an animal girl and I didn't like all the popular sports that everyone else liked, like softball. I was a swimmer and yeah, moved back and forth a couple times and picked up the belief that I don't belong. And this followed me really throughout all my years of school. More specifically, in middle school and high school, I experienced pretty intense bullying. And this just deepened those layers of like, I don't belong, or something's wrong with me, I'm too much, I'm not enough. And throughout high school, I started to get sprinkled in little bits of addiction here and there. And I believe it started from my first rave that I went to in high school. I was 17. I used someone's ID that was 18 to go. I was really young, way too young to be in that environment. And from there, like, picked up quite a bit from that experience, chasing, performing my.
So you are 17 years old going to a rave for the first time. I mean, this is going to be a fun conversation because I was also a rave girl, but I didn't even step into that scene until I was like 21 years old. So what is it like at 17 years old to be in that space?
Yeah, it was quite scary at first. I also was under the influence of MDMA, and I
At
just remember.
17.
Yes, at 17, and I remember being super paranoid and like, what the heck is going on? But also, like, this is the best thing of my life. I went really deep into all the music, and I was obsessed with all those artists. And I feel like at 17, you're able to bounce back a lot quicker. Like, you don't really get hangovers. At least I didn't. So I was still able to like go to school and get really good grades and like be really involved. Captain of the swim team, on board of all the clubs in high school. So that was really interesting.
So
And
stepping into that scene at 17 years old, did that then become something that you're doing regularly? Was it a one and done experience, or like that's when you got pulled into that space and started like that ended up being a place of belonging for you?
yeah, so after that first experience, I definitely got more into the partying weekend after weekend, like house parties. I grew up in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, which is quite the party town. It's like a place where spring breakers love to come. So it became a weekly thing, not necessarily the drugs, but the drinking and partying. And I did eventually chase more raves, like my senior year of high school and then also like freshman year of college. I was going to shows basically every single weekend. Um, so it was definitely, it became a lifestyle for me, that's for sure. It became like a part of my identity was like raver. I
Yeah.
had all the rave clothes and um,
Plur.
plur, and eventually just like frying the brain
Yeah.
and
It's so
yeah.
interesting because I will often talk about like like I said, I was a little bit older, not that it makes it any better. I was just curious for you of like, wow, 17, that's really young to like be in some of those spaces. Um, but I sometimes think I'm like, is that where my spiritual awakening started? Because I mean, being exposed to MDMA, that like ecstatic feeling that you do get, and I do believe in a lot of ways, while like it is absolutely an illicit drug that can be abused, like been there, done that, it
Hmm.
also does have this effect of like dropping all of those walls that were probably built up by the bullying and by feeling like you don't belong. And like for me,
Hmm.
I remember moments of like, oh my God, I want to live in here forever. And I feel like that's why people get pulled in and they do it weekend
Hmm.
after weekend, because if you do have that internal sense of I don't belong, when you're in that space, like everybody belongs. There is like such a beauty and a purity to it outside of the reality that it can become an addiction because it's like an escape from reality.
Exactly. And this, I actually never thought about it that way, but that is entirely true. It became like a place, a safe place for me, and a place where I am welcome, and a place where I can just like be my weird hamster loving self while also like dressing up and experience, like just having really high experiences with friends. So yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about it like that. Um, yes. So that was a big chunk of my life, was the raves and the shows every weekend, and just on repeat, just like techno blasting in my ear, dubstep blasting in my ear. Um, but I eventually graduate and I make it to college. I also left the house at 17 years old, so I was really young to move from Arizona to San Diego at San Diego State University. Um, I was in the top house sorority. I there really got into deep into my addictions with drugs, alcohol, and sex, particularly. And that was when everything kind of like compiled, and um, the addictions just really started there. And then by my third semester of college, I suddenly had my foundation ripped underneath me, and that was when my homelessness started for a couple of months. And from there is when I started sourcing my safety and security outside of myself. I really entered in this space of like greed and manipulation. I didn't have any belief for any higher power. I think at the time I was actually like, I'm atheist. I'm pretty sure that was my belief, was this, I believe in energy, and like I was very much a victim to my circumstance at the time. But
Well, it's almost like,
that was
how could you not? I just want to like back up for a second around. I know you said like that's where you had your sense of security ripped out from under you. You are, did you say a freshman in college or a junior?
yes.
Freshman.
I was actually a sophomore at the time because it was my third semester. So sophomore,
So
18.
you're a sophomore in college. You're already recognizing. Do you know at this point that you are like having addictive tendencies, or does it just feel normal because it's what everybody else is around you is doing too?
It it was the norm. Like actually the sorority encouraged it
Yeah.
for us to black out as many times as we could per week. So that kind of just got ingrained in my brain that the blacking out is normal, and the sleeping around is normal, and it's like it's what makes you cool, and it's what makes you popular, and it's what makes you like relevant. So
I know. I think back to like our poor little baby souls back then. But now you said something so interesting. Like, okay, sophomore in college, your sense of safety gets ripped out from under you because you are now experiencing homelessness. What is that like? How did that happen? What is that process for you?
yeah, so I won't get too much into the story, but my parents ended up moving out to San Diego to be closer to me, and they had a falling out with their business. And at the time, they were funding my college and my life essentially. There was a big falling out that just happened with my whole family. With I think I had a 2 days notice that I had to pack up all my things, and I had to be out of my college apartment, and we had to be out of the home that they were living in. So we had to put as much as we could into the three cars that we had, and we had to be on our merry way to sleep wherever we could, which was in our cars for quite a while. And at the time, I was working for a couple of pet sitting businesses. So I would do overnight stays for clients. I would stay at people's homes. So it's kind of sad, but this was actually a huge blessing that we were able to like sleep in home sometimes. I would have overnight clients, and whenever I would book those, I would invite my whole family to like stay there, so we would have a place to stay for a couple of nights while clients were away on vacation, while also taking really good care of their pets and their home and all that, But that was what we did for a couple of months. And then eventually, my dad is a veteran, so we were able to get motel housing. So we lived in a motel together for quite a few months in a very ghetto, unsafe neighborhood. 4 of us in a motel room, bunk beds. And this is also where the addictions really compiled even more, with that even being possible.
Right. So like you're having this experience away at college where it's the norm. You're surrounded by an entire reality of people who are all just doing the same thing. And I just want to like just nod to anybody listening to this podcast, because like same, right? Like we all go away to college. I've spoken to so many people who are like, I didn't go away to college to get an education. I went away to college to fucking party. And like, why is that? The sense of like camaraderie that we're all coming into at such a young age in this country. I mean, and we can get so into the healing that's had to happen for you since then. But you go from that, just making sure I'm understanding and like following you correctly. Now you're out of college. You're ripped out of college.
Yes.
So like really the only thing you have to lean into is that.
Substance and people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so that was a really big portion of my life. Yeah.
So what's happening now? You said you're deepening into addiction, if that's even possible. Is there a moment where, maybe one moment, many moments, where you wake up and you're like, something's got to give here? Because you're still relatively young for, I know, all the work you've done and where you've landed.
Yes. Yeah. So thank God that my dad was a veteran, because I think that I mentioned before, we got veteran benefits. So we were able to get housing that was like half paid for, or I think maybe paid for entirely in full. So I was hustling. I was working like 14, 15-hour days of pet sitting for 3 different businesses, doing dog walks, overnight stays. Like I was just saying yes to every job opportunity that could come. I think that I used like my last $2 while in the motel room for an ad on Craigslist, and I ended up being able to like shovel horse poop for money. And I was like, thank you. Not thank you, God. Yeah, God wasn't in the picture. But
right. Thank you to whatever.
Thank you. Yeah, just deep survival. I lived in deep survival. I mean, also being modeled to like hustle from my parents growing up. They own their own business, so it's just ingrained in my DNA that I just have to hustle in order to survive and to live. So eventually I was able to, so I'm working all these pet sitting jobs, and then I think that I just reached a point where I was like looking around and I'm like, I'm going to make something different for my life. I'm not doing this anymore. It was almost like a fire was lit inside of me, and I was like, this is not going to be my life. Like, I need to step away from this. Whether that was from a clear place or not, there might have been some anger in there, but I was just tired of my situation. I was tired of the instability and sleeping at friends' houses or just sleeping wherever I could, and just so much unsafety and just so much fear and just not knowing where I was going, and just really like the darkest period of my life, just so much depression and just no purpose. So that fire gets lit inside of me, and it ended up working out that I was able to move in to my first apartment with 2 friends from college who I was still in contact with. So I got my first place with them, and this was around COVID, I believe. And that went great, but still, I'm deep in the addictions. I'm deep in the sleeping around. I'm deep in the drugs and the alcohol. I moved to like one of the most popular party cities in San Diego. It's called Pacific Beach, if you've ever heard of it. And using fake IDs to go to the bars still, because I'm not even 21 yet. I'm 20. Well, I guess backtrack a little bit. I ended up starting a pet sitting business right before I moved in. After working all these jobs, I really learn the ins and the outs of like what it takes to have a pet sitting business. And I was like, okay, this is not that hard. I can definitely do this. And a lot of the clients from the other businesses would come to me to solicit me to just not go through the business anymore. They just wanted to go through me because they were so happy with my care. And I'm like, damn, I'm pretty good at this. And it works out that I was like such an animal lover all my life. I'm like, I love this job. This is like, that was like what gave me purpose actually, was like knowing that I'm really good at taking care of animals and people's pets and like really just loving them and talking to the owners. And yeah, so I started Sunnyside Pet Care is what it's called. It's still running. Sunnyside Pet Care in 2020. And yeah, and then from there, still in the addictions, like I mentioned, and I ended up moving apartments a couple of times.
So when you are talking about being like deep in addiction, is this something now at this point that you feel like has like control over you and over your life, or is it more of just like the constant coping mechanism of dealing of I want to say dealing, but like not dealing with the heaviness that's sitting underneath everything that's happening in your life?
Yeah, I think that some awareness began to get sprinkled in, but at that point it was still just like the norm to me.
Yeah.
And when I say like awareness was sprinkled in, I mean like I would have spurts of shame. That's when like the shame cycles really started. But then I would just be in this like repeated cycle of like wake up the next day not knowing what I did, but then hearing about it and then self-sabotaging behaviors. Like I had this really bad habit of like picking at my skin when I would just feel so much stress, or I would just be sleeping all day, like living in shutdown. And I think that's when I was like, okay, I'm not able to function like my friends. Like I think that I may have like a problem, or like there might be something wrong with me, but that wasn't enough for me to tackle it quite yet. Yeah, so it took a lot more one more times is what I'll say.
Yeah.
It took a lot more like one more times.
And just like validating that also. I mean, just I can resonate. It's so interesting. This is the first time I think maybe ever on the podcast that we're talking about substances and how normalized they are in our society, and from such a young age that it's not introduced as something that is a problem. It's introduced as something. It's honestly like more of a problem when you're not doing it. I've noticed since I've stopped drinking, and I just resonate so deeply with that. The like just one more time, or it's not that bad, or everyone else is doing it, and like for me, I started realizing that alcohol was a really bad coping mechanism right in the beginning of my healing. I was drinking like a bottle of wine a night. And it got to a
Same.
point where it wasn't just like because I want to wind down or because the stress of the day. It was like, no, I'm like waiting to get off the clock. And the thing I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
forward to is like the glass of wine I'm going to pour the second I walk through the door. Haven't even taken my scrubs
Right.
off yet. And like how hard it is to even admit to ourselves that then that's becoming a problem again, because it's so freaking normalized inside of our society. And since I've stopped drinking, it took me years from like to even admit to myself that it could be seen as like a problem, right? Because I'm like, I'm not. That's why I asked you the question of like, are you knowing that this is an active addiction, or is it just like a normal part of everyday life? Because there are people who are like addicts that it's like they know that this substance has complete control over them. And then I think there's
Mm-hmm.
people, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like you or I, who it's like you're just using it as this like incessant coping mechanism where it didn't have like I wasn't drinking all day every day, and yet I was using it every single day. And so I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't see for myself like, oh, I'm addicted to this thing, right? I'm just seeing it as this like normal part of my day that's now beginning to become like a bit of a problem, or I'm noticing like I'm waking up depressed or feeling like shit, and like how you said, like slowly the functioning starts to like
Mm-hmm.
dial all the way down. And yeah, I just think that's such a common place for so many people, where for me my biggest thing was like, well, I don't have to quit because I'm not an alcoholic. Like I couldn't differentiate the two of
Mm-hmm.
like this being a bit of a problem, but it's not like an all the way problem. So I'm not there yet. So I shouldn't have to
Mm-hmm.
stop doing this.
Exactly. That's where I was at too. And I think it is just so normalized, especially depending on where you live. I mean, there's a liquor store at every corner of cities usually. And alcohol is, we use alcohol to celebrate birthdays, to celebrate weddings, baby showers, everything around celebration, there's alcohol there, and it's just become such a normal thing. Um, and yeah, at the time, like you just said, slower and slower, I began to like realize like, okay, maybe it is a problem, but also, like you just said, it's kind of funny. I'm like, I'm not like an alcoholic or anything because I'm still working. I still have my business. Like I'm still making money. I'm still like I can still do my things, and like all my friends are doing this, so it's like I'm still alive, I'm still functioning, and like I live in a city where like yeah, look at all these people who are doing it. How are they all doing it? If they can do it, like I'll do it. It's just it's a really big like group thing that I think society has like programmed into us, and yeah, it's very common.
Yeah, I'm thinking now too, and we'll get kind of deeper into some of the like work of realizing like this is a problem and I want my life to change. But when you're in it, you can't recognize that you're like operating from a shadow or like denying something from a shadow, right? Where like that comparison can come online of like, I'm not that drug addict or that alcoholic. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
that, right? Therefore, I don't
Yeah.
have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally
Yeah.
got down to it inside of, and like for me, um, alcohol was a really normalized part of my entire growing up. Like both of my parents heavily used alcohol, but I never saw them as alcoholics because, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
getting up, functioning, making money, doing the
Same
things that
here.
make you a human being, right? While just like ignoring all of these things that are underneath the surface and how that becomes like a generational pattern. And now you're talking about groupthink, right? Like it's a collective conscious pattern, especially here
Mm-hmm.
in the Western world where it's so freaking normalized with everything, to the point where when I finally started to like stop drinking so much socially, I literally remember one time, and I hadn't fully stopped drinking yet. I was just starting to like play with the idea of sobriety, and I went to um a festival. It was a 420 festival actually, which is funny that I'm playing with sobriety at a 420 festival. Um and I was just like in my element, in a really good mood, dancing my ass off, and I had so many people come up to me that day, particularly men, come up and like either like compliment me on how beautiful I was, or this one guy in particular, I will remember this forever, was like, "Oh my god, you are having the best time out of anybody here. How many beers have you had today?" And I was like, "None." He's like, "Wait, what do you mean none?" And I was like, "I don't drink."
Are you okay?
Yeah, I was like, "I don't drink beer." And he was like, "Okay." And he would like stop and pause and then like ask another question of like, "But why?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I just feel
Mm-hmm.
better without it." And he's like, "And you're still able to have a good time." And it's like there's this curiosity I feel like so many people have, but they just like
Mm-hmm.
don't know that there is another way of being, because the
Mm-hmm.
normal social reality is just to drink or to drug or
Mm-hmm.
to have these substances that enhance our social experiences that are actually just covering
Mm-hmm.
up the fact that like we don't know how to actually connect with each other.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And it's also like a security blanket. At least it was for me, like, especially because I don't know who I am. I'm riddled with just so much fear and unsafety that it makes me feel safe in a way. And my mentors always say that like addiction is usually like a companion for people. It's like it makes you feel less alone. It makes you feel more connected. It's like a false sense of connection and safety, but that's what it is for a lot of people. And I think that's also why it's so big in like the music festival scene, is because like we're all like this, we're all open and like we're all in this shared experience. But if everyone was sober, everyone would be like, hi, like very inward. And yeah, so that's really interesting. And yeah, I was still going to a lot of festivals and stuff too. It's just
So
funny to
how
reflect back.
many years does this go on for, and at what point do you like really decide?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is a moment, maybe there's not. Maybe you woke up inside of healing and you're like, how the fuck did I get here? But at what point, like how long did that go on for, and at what point did you decide that you were going to start doing some
Yeah.
of the deeper internal work?
Yeah, there were a couple of like really big pivot moments, is what I like to call them, that like really made me like they really jarred me. Um, so um, I ended up getting really into the world of self development and like health and fitness. That was like my first entry point into sobriety, which was not there yet.
The
I was
gateway drug.
like, yeah, I was like sober curious at that point because I was like, wow, it feels so good to take care of my body, and I was like lifting 5 days a week and I was eating a lot of protein and like, I tried every single like diet. I tried the carnivore diet. I tried like keto, and then I went into like the world of cleansing and like supplementing, blind supplementing, which do not do, so harmful. I Beef liver pills were like trending, and I ended up getting vitamin A toxicity because there's so much vitamin A. Plus, if you're already eating like a whole diet, it's just you don't need a lot of these supplements. Anyway, I get into the world of like supplements, cleansing, health and fitness, and then that's honestly like another cover up for my addictions because I'm over here thinking like, okay, I got it, like I finally feel good majority of the time. I have like a little bit more motivation. I'm a little bit more focused on like my business. I'm growing my business a bit more. I actually ended up getting 2 employees that were helping me out. And I was sober curious, like I said. So I would go through spurts of like not drinking for 2 weeks, and then I would cave, but it would be like a full on 2-day bender. So it was like these really big like periods of sobriety, and like, but I'd be I'd be like, okay, like now I deserve it. So let me go and like go out with these friends and go to a show, and then absolutely wrecked for like a week after that. So this is also when like the hangovers and stuff started to get worse and worse. And this is when I began realizing that it was like a problem and that I really wanted to change my ways because I wanted to feel good. Now that I was more in like the environment of like my gym and like seeing all these like people full of vitality and health and just seeing their moods, I'm like, wow, okay, like I want to go in on this world, but still I was just being sucked into it over and over again after having like these spurts. And I think that went on for maybe like 8 months. This was about like 2 years ago. So it's been like a really rapid shift. Maybe 2 years ago is when I really got into like this world, and I ended up seeking out a counselor because, long story short, but my parents went through another round of homelessness and they ended up having to stay with me. And then I feel like after all the like health work that I did, I was just like, I'm back here. Like, whoa, how do I handle this? Like, it just brought me back. Now that I have knowledge about like traumatic imprints, I'm like, whoa, my body was just in like a constant state of shutdown because it didn't know what to do with all this information. So I sought out my first counselor. She was a 5-element acupuncturist. Her name's Dr. Gray. She's in San Diego. She's amazing. And she was really the first person who didn't ask like what's wrong with you or like what's wrong with your body. It was more like what's happening in your life. And she was really the first person who, I mean, every time I would look at her eyes, I would just cry because I'm like, this human sees me and like she's here to help me and she's not judging me and like she can see through me. You know, when you just meet someone who can just see through you and like they just understand your humanity. She was like the first person that came into my life who just met me with that. And I started receiving regular 5-element acupuncture treatments. Are you familiar with 5-element acupuncture?
No.
It is the most ancient form of acupuncture, and they hold the points only for 90 seconds at a time. I don't know the exact science behind it, but all I know is that it changed a lot in my body and like how I was able to like ground myself. And I still didn't have much like body awareness at the time. I just knew that it made me feel better. So that was like the first modality I sought out, was this acupuncture, and then our just like dialogue that we would have before the treatments, like what's going on in my life and how she could support me and help me through it. And eventually I go to her with like more specific issues. For instance, like my acne was pretty severe. I had really severe cystic acne all on my face, and I was getting sick a lot too. I was getting a lot of colds, and I just told her, I'm like, I just keep getting sick. Like, I think my immune system's just weak. And she was like, have you ever heard of German New Medicine? And I was like, no. And she's like, we don't buy into the paradigm that like you're just getting sick all the time. Like, what's happening in your life? Because I was still withholding some information. I was still living in this place of like, can I really let this woman see like all parts of my life? Because I was still going back and forth to addictions, or like going to like another hookup with like another casual hookup. But it was just still this back and forth game that I was playing, you know, even though I was doing significantly better than before. It was just survival patterns that I just wasn't really aware of. And she eventually leads me to the world of German New Medicine, and my mind was blown. This was really the modality that changed everything for me. I began to see my symptoms as really like a messenger, and that there's nothing wrong with my body. German New Medicine is a lens in which to view symptoms, that there are very specific biological programs that happen during emotionally shocking and isolating events. So it hits our psyche first, that's when the identities form, then it goes to the brain, and then it affects a certain tissue or organ. And when she told me about acne, she was like, you know that acne is considered an attack conflict in GNM. Like, where in your life are you maybe feeling attacked? And I was like, oh, where in my life am I feeling attacked? Like, nowhere. Like, no, that's not, because it was such a big paradigm shift to viewing symptoms. And I was like, no, there's no way. But then I do my own research and I'm like, wait, my psyche's just interpreting all these events happening to me as like attacks. And that's just my body's way of protecting me, is creating little bumps on me. I was like, it was just a deeper level of like compassion for myself. And then that was really when my journey with God started as well, because I began to see how brilliant our body's design is, and how nothing is by accident, and all the symptoms in my body were just messengers, and just messages from God trying to show me like, hey, this is where you're not free, like look here, instead of me seeking out over and over again just like ceremonies and new age practices. I was like, okay, I had a place now where I could like pray with my symptoms and like think, okay, what's happening in my life right now where this symptom is coming up? And then that was really when my relationship with God started, was in the German medicine journey.
So how inside of German New Medicine, and I know a bit about this, I've like looked into it a little bit around my fertility journey, and I already had a conceptual understanding from my own spiritual experiences that like nothing is on accident, and the body is this beautiful technological piece of fucking artwork that is constantly just trying to connect us back home to wholeness and goodness and lightness in our lives. But question for you is like, so you get introduced to German New Medicine, and I know that a lot of that is like philosophical information, right? It's like by the time that you are having this outbreak of a symptom, it's actually because you're like in the healing phase of something, and it's trying to like give you a message about what is healing. And I'm curious for you, what does it look like for you to begin like working with that philosophy? I know you said like you're praying with your symptoms, so like what does that process look for like for you? How are you utilizing German New Medicine inside of these things that are coming up for you in your life?
Right. So I actually skipped over a very important piece of my German New Medicine journey. I sought out mentorship from Brandon Bozarth. He is like an expert in the field of root cause healing with somatic inquiry plus GNM. So that was really when, because German New Medicine is just a lens to view it. You know, it's not really something that you practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually something that you practice along like other modalities, and you just kind of use it as like,
Information,
yeah, like a lens.
right?
Yeah, it's like, it's good data, it's information. So I began working with him, and I would come to him with like a symptom, and we would end up working through the root cause identity, like what identity was formed during a shocking moment. So like say I came to him with constipation, and we would have a whole session on getting to the root of a shocking moment that had to do with like what constipation is, which is usually like not being able to let go of anger or a territory conflict. So we would work through like, okay, let's bring you back to a moment where you felt this anger. And then it would be like, oh, okay, I got really angry when I was homeless, and like this happened and this happened. And then he's like, okay, so what, it's more of a thorough process, but the whole premise of it is like, what are you making these shocking moments that happen mean about you, the world, others? Who are you being? How could it like come across? And then it was through a lot of sessions with that, getting to the root of pretty much like all my false identities, did my symptoms just naturally fall away. And as far as like the praying and like doing things on my own time, I would journal out a lot of just like prayers to God specifically. And at the time I didn't really have like a deep relationship with God, but it still just felt like intuitively like there's something out there for me that's like looking out for my best good, or my best interest, I guess. And just I would name like all the areas where like my symptoms, after Brandon would work through me, like, okay, where is my skin like feeling attacked? And then I would like name it out, and then I would come to more sessions and we would just like pull it apart and work on it. So that was how I practiced German New Medicine with him. And then the funny thing about GNM too, and that way to practice it, is that's still all intellectual. It's not incorporating the nervous system. And I still had no awareness of the nervous system and the body. I mean, I would do like my like meditation practices and I would do like my yoga and stretching and stuff, but I'm still dysregulated and I'm living in shutdown, even though I can name every single false identity and like my symptoms are clearing up for the most part. My symptoms would go on and off, but this is when, thank God, I was led to Metamorphosis, and this is a really rigorous 12-week program of ontology coaching and nervous system repatterning and getting to the root of like traumatic imprints. And once I incorporated like that with GNM, my mind was blown. I had like a new reverence for like myself and the way that God created me, and it became intolerable to abandon myself in the way that I was with like sleeping with men and drugs and alcohol. It just slowly became like more and more intolerable. And like I said, with like the one more time, there was finally a time where I remember my last time ever like having a casual relationship and like going on like another bender, and I get home and I like look at myself in the mirror and I just see like the bags under my eyes, and I just like felt God tell me like, you are so beautiful and so loved, like do not do this to yourself anymore, like you can let this go, this is not you anymore. And I really have not looked back since. And yeah, so sobriety is something that I'm very passionate about. And yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And because I feel like the lens through which we are normally looking at things like addiction, or I mean, just because that's been such a hot topic of this conversation, right? Any kind of mental health issues, any kind of physical health issues. I mean, we're talking about all of it here and the way that it's all interconnected, but constantly looking at it as a problem to fix. There's something wrong with me that I need to fix. And then getting into this kind of work, being kind of synchronistically led to the 5 elements acupuncture, and then her bringing up GNM, and then now you're interested in GNM and you're researching that, so now you find a facilitator that can help you with that, and being led into this program that's like putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, all of it leading us back to like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. And all of the symptoms and all of the addictions and all of the things that you are, the programs that you're running and the things that you're stuck in your life are actually coming from this idea that there is something wrong with me. Right. And I know it's so much more nuanced and convoluted and intricate and in depth than that. Right. And each person's healing journey is their own. But every person that I get to talk to in this experience comes home to eventually this connection to God. Right. That is right there, so close to home, telling you like you are whole and you always have been whole. And it is just the reality that you believed that you weren't. Right. You were born into separation, went through this entire experience so that you could come home to the experience of wholeness. And I just, as you're talking, I'm just having so much reverence for, like, I geek out on the masterpiece of our bodies and our psyches as this vessel for this experience. And something I'm so passionate about inside of the healing work is those breakthrough moments where you can finally see the false identity that you were wearing, and then you get to have the choice to put it down. Right. And like one of the passions that I have around wanting to spread this work like so far and wide is that, right? You get into this state of being with yourself and you're like, oh my God, everybody is whole. They just don't know it. They just don't know it. And then you start to be able to see the places where they're keeping themselves in separation. And we have to move as facilitators around things like the martyr complex and the savior complex, of course. But it's like just this vision that you can begin to sink into of like, this isn't just possible for me, it's possible for everybody. And then that's where like the desire to share your story comes from, of like, and your story is like a powerful story. Like I was thinking about you before we got on this conversation and was just thinking of like the word resilience. And it's something that I wish nobody ever had to be, but it is your
Mhm.
resilience that's brought you through that entire framework into now how you get to live and navigate the world. And that's not to say that it's all like picture perfect, but in such a
Mhm.
short span of time to move from there's something wrong with me, I'm different, I don't belong, through all of what
Mhm.
had to kind of like come to a head in your life for you to circle all the way back home to like, I am beautiful and I am whole and God loves me exactly as I am. And that as you're doing these things, it's now no longer a fight to put down addictions, right? I feel the same
Yeah.
way that all of a sudden one day, the last time I drank, it has been 2 days ago was exactly 6 months since I've drank alcohol, which is like huge
Mhm.
generational curse for me and my family. Like it's something that I am so
Mhm.
fucking proud of. And when people are like, how did you do it? It got to a point where I'm like, there was no, I didn't have to fight it anymore. If
Mhm.
anything, it was a fight to keep drinking of like, oh my God, every time I do this, I feel horrible. Therefore, like it just doesn't make
Mhm.
sense anymore. And it just falls away versus it being this thing
Mhm.
that you have to like force away.
Right. Yeah, like I said, it becomes intolerable to abandon yourself. And once you know how like whole and loved you inherently are, it's like, why would I ever go back to that? And all there's left to do now is to like spread the gospel that is that, like that's all I want to do now is just serve and just pour out to people. And like you said, how you start to realize like everyone is just operating from that place. I had a moment the other day where I was driving and I just was watching people like walk by and some of them are homeless and I just started crying and I was just like, man, if everyone knew how loved they were, like the world would not have any suffering. And it just feels like a huge part of my mission too is just to like bring people back to that wholeness and that love that I have somehow, by the grace of God, like met after just a lifetime of separation, like you said. It's just beautiful and it's just beyond like our wildest comprehension too. Like I didn't know that my life I could have like this sound of a mind before. I had no idea. I didn't know that like I could live with so much peace and I didn't know that I could look at my bank account and not cringe and like be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to die." Like literally a fear of death when I look at a number in on my phone. And while it's very confronting to like do the work and to be resilient and to reach the end of yourself, it's like a world. My mentor says like there's gonna be a point where you're 1 day old, you're 1 second old, you're 1 week old, and then like a whole world of possibilities just like open up for you once you free all that energy up, because addiction really is just energy wanting to be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And once you view it from that point and not from a place that needs to be like shamed or like even calling someone an addict. Like my mentor always says, like, no one's an addict. There's someone who drinks alcohol or there's someone who does drugs. And it's really like at no fault of our own. Like that's the human condition. Like it's the way that things were laid out for us, So
To create
a deeper
identity
level
out
of
of that
compassion.
separation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you brought in along your story now this relationship that grew with God, and that's kind of like where your and my paths started crossing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I am out here navigating the spiritual experience and having wild connections to God, and I'm starting to talk about it on the internet, which feels really like scary and twisty for me. And then there's beautiful
Mm-hmm.
humans such as Audrey who are landing in my inbox saying like, thank you so much for saying these things, and thank you so much for giving
Mm-hmm.
like my process this place to like to connect to. So I'm curious
Mm-hmm.
for you because it's a place where we've connected so much. Like how you said God started coming into the picture around German New Medicine, but how has that like evolved to this place where now you are a woman who is saying like my life purpose is to preach the gospel of oneness and love, and that everybody has the capacity to come home to this inside of themselves.
Right. Yeah. So my experience with God has been like peppered in. There wasn't like one big cathartic moment where I'm like, this is it. Like, I give my life up to you. There were a few different moments where I would feel God in my body and I would be like, okay, that was a really beautiful sign, but I'm not fully convinced yet just because of how much I just had in me of like there's no way that this could be true. And, following people who posted things about God too, like you, for instance, and just like really flooding my consciousness with things about God and taking that in, but then also doing like doing my own research and like praying on my own. And I have to give a lot of tribute to Metamorphosis as well, the 12-week program that I mentioned, because they led an entire call on devotion to a higher power, is how they frame it. And I really learned that it's not religion, it's relationship, and that you begin this relationship by just talking out loud and like praying, but praying can really just be like a conversation. Like, I know you say like homie G or like sky daddy. It's like, it can really be like that. It's not this like super serious like thing that it has to be. And they really framed devotion to a higher power for me in a very powerful way that stuck with my psyche. And I just began to see like the truth in it all from my own experience and through like my family's experience. And I feel like what it means to like be obedient to a higher power, society has like named obedience as like a bad thing, like it's less freedom or lack of freedom, when really obedience, me giving my life to a higher power, God, Jesus, has led to more freedom than anything in my life. Like walking the narrow road, walking like steadfast in my faith, and like not being sucked or like lulled into like other things that are trying to pull me out of it or pull me away from it. Just continuously coming back and back and back. And I do this for everyone, it's different, but for me, it looks like reading scripture and just more praying, being around other believers, and doing more of this somatic work too, because the more that I free up the traumatic imprints that live in my body, the more I can actually feel what my natural state is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because also being sober for quite a few months now, I'm like, oh wow, I'm giving my brain the room to like recover, and it's still recovering. It's probably going to take a few more years to fully like recover, but man, God moves so quick when you obey and give your life to something beyond you, and you stop serving the self. And that's been like the biggest theme of my life, I think, is like obedience and something beyond myself, because in return it's just infinite love, and I am able to pour out to people that I love in this way. And my discernment is so on point. Like I know my yeses and my nos. I know what is meant for me and what is not. It's not like a question.
So beautiful. I have a question for you based off of that. So like around this word obedience, which like it really is, it's a trigger word for people of like, and I think it does come from the reality of how much distortion has been created across the history of humanity around like being obedient to this like wrathful God, right? This like thing that has control over you, and you have to give over all of your vices and all these things. Now, as we're talking about it, that's the natural progression of the healing journey that we've both gone on, of like you literally give up your vices because you realize your vices are thing like coping mechanisms. But I'm curious for you, like if you can think of a real scenario in your life of like choosing obedience versus choosing something self-led or something that's like off that narrow path, of a place where like you have navigated that, right? Almost like bringing a real-time example to what obedience looks like and feels like for you.
So actually a really good example of this is also something that I learned in the Metamorphosis 12-week program, and that's making amends with your past. And I want to do it my way. I want to just assume that my past is clear and that it's already forgiven, and it's already something kind of like a bypassy way, I guess, that can happen. I think when I came to God, I was like, okay, I'm forgiven and this, but there's a really big portion that like doors need to be closed and shut. And that's something that I really learned through Metamorphosis. And making amends, you have to put all of your pride aside and know that you're doing it to clear that energy between you and that person that like I'll speak for myself, that I wronged. Because like I said, when I was going through the homelessness, I had a lot of greed and manipulation in me. And obviously God has purified that through my heart during the sanctification process, but having to go backwards and talk to these people who I was not so great to, and getting out of my ego's thinking of like, what are they going to think about you? Or what if they don't forgive you? Or this, and this. And it's like, God is like, no, we're going to make your past right so that you can walk in integrity from here forward. And then it's like that process of clearing my past, I feel like was a really big example of doing it God's way versus my way, that just leads to a lot more freedom. And yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to think too of the ways that, like, I know you brought up sort of like new age spirituality versus walking this narrow path,
Mm-hmm.
and the ways that so many concepts inside of new age spirituality actually are directly connected to what it is that you were talking about, like
Mm-hmm.
cord cutting, right? But cord cutting in
Mm-hmm.
new age spirituality is like for me, and so that I can feel better, and so that
Mm-hmm.
I no longer have to think about this thing, right? And it's usually based more around that victim mentality of like what was done to me instead of what I
Mm-hmm.
did. And that's, wow, that's actually landing for the first time ever right now. This like
Mm-hmm.
what was done to me versus also where did my darkness show up, and where had I
Mm-hmm.
gone wrong, and where had I actually been that perpetrator. And I think that that's something that's
Mm-hmm.
really deeply difficult for people to look at, the ways in which
Mm-hmm.
their separation from God evolved into tendencies that allowed them to act in ways that are out of integrity inside of relationships
Mm-hmm.
and with other people. Yeah, that's really, really interesting to actually like think about.
Yeah.
What you just said, through this sanctification process, is that something that you did through metamorphosis, or is that like something that's happened since then? What do you mean by sanctification?
So I think that the what I meant by that is the 12-week program of Metamorphosis was like the clearing, and it felt like my whole consciousness was flipped inside out because we lay out everything in our life, like our trauma timeline, physical mapping, grief, money, like every area that you can think of in your life, we lay it out. And then after that, it's like, okay, what next? And then it's like, okay, how can I actually walk in integrity now? And like, we don't just continue to lean on like the practices, I guess. It's like something beyond ourselves or beyond myself. So the sanctification process for me, for instance, right now is my relationship with money. This is something that I don't feel like is fully complete yet, but it's something that I'm being sanctified in day by day.
Mm,
And for example, like learning to be really generous with my money and not super scarce, because if I pay this person, then oh my God, will that mean I'm homeless again? It's just how my psyche runs. So like my sanctification with being a good steward of like my money and my time, and continuously coming back to God in like prayer or reading scripture and just seeing like, and just asking like, God, show me your wisdom, show me what I should be doing in this. Like, I give up my will to you. I want to know what I should be doing from your lens and not from my lens. And I can immediately feel when it's something that I'm doing that's just my way versus God's way. And it's becoming like a fun game almost. I'm like, where am I still being like worked on, if that makes
mm-hmm.
sense? And money is a really big one because I want to be generous. I want to be a really good steward of like the resources that I do have, and my traumatic imprints of like homelessness and survival like say otherwise. So it's like this constant renewal that's happening, and that's what I mean by sanctification. It's like a daily walk.
Yeah.
It's literally a walk. It's not a sprint. I can't expect it to be cleared up overnight. It's like just a raised awareness that continues day by day.
Yeah. It's so beautiful because this is where like the process of coming home to God, wholeness, whatever it is that anybody wants to call it, coincides directly with like neuroscience and what it
Mm-hmm.
is that we actually have to do in a daily practice in order to become new, in order to transform, right? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people think about like a spiritual awakening or an awakening to God as this like magical thing that all of a sudden you're brand new, right? That all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
like, and I think that's a way in which sometimes certain ways in which religion has become distorted like creates that
Mm-hmm.
idea, right, of like, oh, you're just going to get baptized and you become a new person and that's it,
Mm-hmm.
versus the reality of what it actually takes to walk that narrow path of wholeness with God while
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously being a human and feeling the imprints that have been made by your trauma, and like why trauma healing is such an important part to coming home to that wholeness. Like the two things
Mm-hmm.
are just, they go hand in hand. And I think it's so beautiful that now we have like such a wave of human beings on this planet that have testimonies like this, that aren't just like I'm not saying that these aren't real and they're not true and they're not beautiful, but aren't just like, oh, Jesus showed up for me in a vision and I went and I got baptized and I became anew. Where it's like the reality for most people is that they start to slowly, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
something's got to give. I've got to change. Right. And I love that you brought in the piece of your story of like getting kind of like hyper aware of your body and health and cleansing and trying to like get rid of what was wrong inside of your body. And then, but how that led you to feeling good enough most of the time that you start to realize like the hangovers are getting worse because
Mm-hmm.
my body's not acclimating to this anymore. Like I'm not living in this steady state of always being like either drunk or hungover. I have periods of time where my body's feeling really good. And like
Right.
those things that are like all of that is God walking you home to that highest
Yes.
healing and
All of
those,
it is so serving.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so powerful to listen to the processes of human beings that I think we live right now in an age on social media where it's so easy to see people who are either super spiritual or who've come home to Christ or who are talking about God
Mm-hmm.
and just think that it was this like overnight light switch. And I just love
Mm-hmm.
listening to the grounded reality of the work that human beings are truly
Mm-hmm.
putting in, like you said, in this like way that sanctifies you, this way that does truly
Mm-hmm.
change you from inside out, and that through those experiences like that's how God comes online in the body.
Mm-hmm.
That's how God becomes an experience and not just something that you're taught about or that's only happening in your mind or that you're taught that you should believe so that X, Y, and Z can happen or so that you can be a
Mm-hmm.
good person or so that you can get into heaven. It's like no, it actually becomes this embodied. One of my teachers,
Mm-hmm.
we talk so much about gnosis, which is like the experience of it
Mm-hmm.
inside of your own body, which is such an interesting
Yeah.
element to being a spiritual teacher, right? Like I talk about these concepts all the time on social media, on my podcast, but and it's important, it's breadcrumbs for people, right? It's creating new neural pathways for people as well, but the
Mm-hmm.
most important piece is like your journey and your experience and you coming home to
Mm-hmm.
you knowing that that connection that you have with God is leading you in your direction and that that's not necessarily going to look anything like your story or my story, and then the beautiful
Mm-hmm.
connectivity that can come online when we exchange these stories and we recognize like, oh wow, humans are really living out just like all different versions of this same walk back home to wholeness.
Exactly. Yeah. You nailed that. Yeah, and just one point that I want to touch on too with like the sanctification process, because I think you kind of brought this up in some way or another, is I there's a lot of nuance too to like the traumatic imprint healing work, like with the big cathartic somatic processes that could be just an addiction too, you know. I did realize like a couple months ago I was placing a lot of like my, I guess, like worthiness, or like once I have that somatic process and I release that thing, then I'll be good. So it's also like not pedestalizing the like or chasing like the big cathartic releases, because then that'll be like what makes me free. You know, these things are processed like in perfect timing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready to process a lot of the things I have been lately than I was like 2 years ago. Like there's just no way. And a lot of times like the most cathartic healing moments too have happened when I'm not even trying. I'm like walking on the beach and I'm like, oh my God, like I get it now. And I'm like, whoa. And that's another thing that I've really been realizing on this walk too, is to not, literally not to pedestalize anything, but to just have it all merge together equally, you know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think like anything, and I've thought this a couple times throughout this conversation, there's a light side and a dark side to literally absolutely everything. And like we could boil it all
Yes.
down to addiction. You could become addicted to substances to avoid your pain. You could become addicted to ceremonies to avoid your pain. You could become addicted to church to avoid your pain and not actually
Mm-hmm.
go through the deep internal processes that these walks and ways of being are aiming to guide us home to, right? And I think it's so beautiful to live in a sea of humans who are waking up and finding modalities and being like, this is the thing and you have to try this thing, and be and I do think that we all have these gifts inside of us that we're supposed to share, right? Like there are people who are supposed to become obsessed with breath work and learn the ins and outs of how
Yes.
to really work with that with your nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
and there are people who are supposed to go all the way deep into the plant medicine path and learn the ins and outs of how to work with that alongside your nervous system. As I'm saying all of this,
Yes.
I'm like, everybody needs to learn about their nervous system because that's going to be like, that's the gateway, that's the doorway, and that's what we really need to
That's
be
it.
working with and navigating, because if not, these cathartic experiences become another high that we're chasing. And you get into the cycle of like, okay, I had that big cathartic experience and I thought that was going to be the thing, but now you're a month or 2 months later and it's like, well, that wasn't the thing and I'm still feeling, and like maybe it's this thing, and now you go into another ceremony or another experience. And I just had a guest on last week who is a somatic therapist, and we actually sat in ayahuasca together and we were having this deep conversation about the nuance that isn't taught because it's such like a hot topic right now for people just want to fucking heal, and they don't realize that they have these unconscious westernized shadows that are like, I want to take the pill and I want to be better, right? I want this quick fix. And there's not enough grounded expertise on what you are truly doing to your nervous system when you are reconnecting to trauma like that. And I know that I've had some ceremonial experiences that I actually just like traumatized myself deeper. They brought awareness, they brought enlightenment to like, oh my God, I didn't realize that thing was living under the surface. But the explosion of the experience I had teetered me into borderline psychosis because my nervous system wasn't ready to handle that. And I think that that's something that we only learn and grow as we go. And I think as like a society, some of the people inside of this field are really coming online now with the importance of not just trauma informed, but like nervous system expertise when it comes to those things, and recognizing that it's not just the cathartic experience that allows you to heal. It's the integration and the working with and the mastery of this instrument or this vessel that we've been given by God, that again is like such a masterpiece and will tell us everything that we need to know about every avenue we need to go down. But more of that softer, stiller, like prayer and walks on the beach and having revelations inside of that versus
in the mundane.
Yeah. Versus needing the peak experiences. And I believe that everything serves a purpose and everybody's experience is going to be what it is. But I can even admit to now that I used to be a person who definitely chased peak experiences, looking for like, if I can just go deeper, if I could just get a little deeper. It always felt for me like, oh, we just didn't get all the way in there. But if we could get all the way in there, then I would be fully healed.
Right. And what a relief it is to like be away from that space, because then you could really just start to live and you can start to create, because you don't think there's no big experiences to heal because everything's healed in perfect timing. And like, we're doing a lot of the work that like 99.9% of the world also won't touch most of the time. So it's like, we got to give ourselves some grace. We did all the work that we needed to for this time period, and like the rest will unfold perfectly. But
100%.
Yeah, like you said with integration, like every little moment is a moment of integration. Like an interaction in the grocery store that maybe might feel a little crunchy, I'm like, that's not a threat to my identity anymore, and then I can act differently. And it's like like literally everything in our lives is integration. So I love how you said that.
I was gonna say, like, those are some of my most profound moments when I have like big money shit too. And like, I just recently in Costa Rica had a day where I went into, there's this like famously extremely expensive supermarket. You're probably familiar with it.
Organico.
And I walked in there to get like one of their bowls for dinner or something. And I looked at it and was like, and actually had a like, oh wow, that's a really good price for dinner. And internally I was like, I think that's the first time I've ever looked at anything and not been like, it's so expensive, and if I buy that, then I'm going to die. And it's those little moments, like, it's like, that's where your freedom is going to come from. It's not from the, like, I don't know. There's so many things that people get on this path for like building huge businesses or making a ton of money or all of the things, right? It's not from
and to celebrate that little win when you realize like, oh my gosh, I didn't just freak out. Like literally celebrate it. Be like, woo, like I'm free. I'm getting freed up from that.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's so interesting. I also just want to point out, I know you've brought up metamorphosis quite a couple times throughout this. So Audrey's actually my friend who didn't link me to, but somehow synchronistically this all happened at the same time. There's a couple episodes back for those of you who are listening with Jacob Greikar, who is one of the founders of Metamorphosis. And definitely go back and listen to that episode if you're interested in this process that Audrey's been talking about, because it's like, this is how we weave, dude. Like just talking about our testimonies and our stories and the things that we have walked ourselves out of, but alongside the like truly service driven, heart purpose-based, mission-based humans who have lived through experiences just like your own, just like my own, and now are coming back from the depths of that like underworld with so much knowledge to share. And I just, that it's such an important piece of this podcast for me, is like that web that gets to be weaved.
Right. Yeah. And I'm actually still being mentored by Jeremiah and Jacob, and I'm interning with them and helping them just like spread the word, because I want as many women as possible genuinely to experience what I experienced from that program. They're so rigorous, they're so loving, it's like they're the epitome of like lovingly calling people forward into the best versions of themselves. They don't let anything slide. They hold you so accountable, and I think accountability is like a big thing that's lacking in the self-development space too. Self-development space, healing space. So I can't say enough good things about them. And whenever people ask me about my story, I have to point it back to them, because there's no way that I could have done it without, like all the healing modalities that I sought out. And like Dr. Grace, my acupuncturist, and Brandon Bozarth, and Jeremiah and Jacob, and Metamorphosis. And now I'm like, why wouldn't I want to go all in on Metamorphosis after seeing like just the depths that they brought me to, and like just witnessing all the women's lives that they're changing. And yeah, so highly recommend that program too.
So beautiful. So there are two final questions I ask everybody who comes on the podcast. First one being, you know that this is a windy, not linear, inside out, upside down journey that we go on, right? To take you from that place that you were talking about, like deep in addiction and feeling so disconnected and like you don't belong, to now be sitting here today talking about the ins and outs of your healing experience and actually walking as somebody who is stepping into service in the world. What piece of advice, if you could give one piece of advice, or you could broadcast out one nugget of wisdom to somebody who's like really in the depths, or maybe in that place of like, let's even bring it back to a real-time example for you of like, just one more time.
I would say to look beyond yourself, because it's not yours to carry. That's a huge burden to carry over and over again. And I have to bring it to look into like your higher power. And it doesn't even need to be Jesus or God. It can literally be anything, but just something that is beyond yourself to look for. That's what I would say, because we can't do it ourselves. We will fall flat on our face over and over again if there's not something beyond ourselves that we can lean on and that loves us so, so deeply.
Beautiful. And last but not least, where can people find you? I know that you're just kind of starting to step your foot into the world of service, not necessarily here to promote any one thing, but just so people can come into contact with you, right? Like another huge piece of this podcast is to connect people. I mean, the whole intro to my podcast is to create conversations for those who are on the journey to know that they are not alone. So where can people find you and connect with you?
Yes, so right now just on Instagram, Audrey Kazmar, and I actually have a link tree up. I'm offering free somatic inquiry sessions, but the caveat is that they have to be recorded for my development, because I watch it through with my mentors, but they've been pretty powerful so far for the women who have done them. I'm still in the learning phases and I'm taking my training very seriously, but if you would like to get on a free discovery call and a free session while I'm still offering them before I do more in-depth offers, shoot me a little DM. I always check them. And also with Metamorphosis, if you decide to sign up with Metamorphosis, you'll see my face in there. I'm on the leadership team, and I pop in there every once in a while to help out where I can. And yeah, but I'd say just Instagram.
Amazing. And we will put the links for that below. I'll also put the links for your link tree for those free sessions. Did you hear that, people? If you are interested in anything that we are talking about today, this is an opportunity for you to invest nothing and receive probably leaps and bounds from this woman.
Trained by pioneers.
From this woman who I know is going to be such a powerhouse in this space, because you are walking from a place of so much faith and so much heart. And like I know we've only gotten to briefly know each other, but watching the way in which you are walking into your service from this place of like, God show me, God guide me, and not from this place of I got to build a business and I got to make money, is just like so refreshing and so beautiful to see. So Thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation, for your time, for your energy, and for your testimony of what is possible when you really devote yourself to those modalities that you are guided into, that are here to really just bring you back home to that wholeness inside of yourself.
Thank you so much, Molly.
Of course. And for all of the listeners, thank you for being here. If you loved this episode, if you have been loving the show, please take a moment to leave us a rating, leave us a review, share this episode with all of your magical friends, because without you, this show does not get to grow. I love you guys so much. I will see you on the next episode.